The assignment for this week is homework 7. And for homework 7, you are to read and take notes on chapter 11 in your textbook. This chapter is about reports for information and analysis. So you will be, of course, continuing work on project 2. So for the purposes of this and the future homework, you have your group that you work for. When you open your homework, you'll see your group name and the types of organizations that you might choose from, something that you might be in business doing, or some government agency that might be doing this. It's kind of up to you to invent your company on the basis of one of these choices. And the homework assignment is to write a short preliminary version of a feasibility study. Your textbook explains what a feasibility study is. So you're going to write a feasibility study for making a change to a piece of equipment or a procedure that your organization currently uses. And so taking off from last week where you worked on a very, very short annotated bibliography, you're to gather more information for your feasibility study, so you're going to need some more sources so that you can compare and contrast two different or three different choices that your organization might make. Okay, so you'll start with the research that you gathered for homework 6, and you will gather further research on that piece of equipment or procedure, as well as those offered by rival companies, right? So presumably there is a company or an organization that created this piece of equipment or this procedure that is in use in your company or your organization. So you're going to look for different ones. Let's say, for example, your supervisor has said maybe we need to change the fleet of cars that we're using for our sales staff. And our sales staff is currently using I don't know, Dodge Darts, whatever, some kind of a car. And so you want to look at rival companies that make a similar type of a car. Let's say you want to have electric cars, and maybe you want to compare electric cars made by 3 different companies. Maybe Toyota makes one, maybe Chevy makes one, maybe Dodge makes one. So you would investigate those 3 different cars and decide which one is going to work the best for you. Actually have a life example of that. My father worked for a company, and the owner wanted to decide whether the workmen should be using Fords or Chevys. And so he bought some of each and tested them on the road and tested them for how long they would last and what kind of gas mileage they would get and how reliable they would be and whether or not they needed a lot of maintenance. And this was, I think, in the 1970s, so it's been a while ago. But that boss determined, based upon what his employees did with the vehicles that they had to drive, he decided that he would buy a fleet of Chevy pickups. So anyway, that is something that you'll be doing, but not driving them. You'll just do market research, if you like. Okay, so where were we? For example, let's say your company is currently using Google Docs for word processing, and your employer has asked you to do research on whether or not to purchase Microsoft Office. In short, to do a feasibility study, you must have several potential choices to compare and contrast for advantages and disadvantages. Since you're being relied upon to provide unbiased research, you need the most reliable research, and you need independent research for each choice, which is to say, you're not going to decide to buy a specific kind of tractor simply on the basis of what that one company says about their own product. You need independent research. Okay, a feasibility study usually has 11 parts, but your homework 7 is a preliminary version, so it's only going to have 5 or 7 parts. You need an introduction, you need the section on definitions, you need the section on background, or possibly you could call it history or existing conditions, but this is a section that you will call one of these things. You need an advantages section and a disadvantages section. You will build the rest later when you write project 2. A feasibility study works on the same kinds of principles you use when you're making a major family purchase, right? Such as a car. You start with a list of desired features. Maybe you want good gas mileage and reliability. Then you gather the data on various cars available on the market. You review the Consumer Affairs website to read the professional assessments of different makes and models of cars. You want the one that's the most reliable, the least expensive in repairs, the most durable, with the best resale value. So if you want those things, you do market research, because cars are expensive and not getting what you want will waste your time and your money. These are the same reasons why organizations do feasibility studies. They want a good return on their investment, whether that return is profit, improved safety, improved productivity, improved public outcomes for social services, safer streets, justice and fairness, or improved quality of life. All of these things are things that your organization might want and more. This is just a short list. So Chapter 11 in your textbook gives you excellent advice on where to go to find high-quality research of various kinds, so you want to read it and pay close attention to the tips, the advice, and the models given. For this homework, you will need to start with 3 organization or company web pages or white papers that explain the features of the items or procedures that you are studying. You will need to compare and contrast at least 3 similar items or procedures. Beyond reading the company sales pitch on the item or procedure, which is what a white paper is, you need third-party assessments of the items or procedures in question. While online reviews can inform readers of how well consumers are pleased with purchases, these are written by unqualified people. Look for ratings done by specialists or consumer advocacy groups. In addition to third-party analysis, also go into the Henry Madden Library databases to research the more general concerns about the item or procedure, see what scientific studies are saying about the procedures or equipment and their use. For Homework 7, you'll need to cite sources in text and in a references page. So you already did an annotated bibliography. For Homework 7, you're not going to do an annotated bibliography. You do not need the annotations in Homework 7, but you do need a references page, so you still need the publication information to go at the end. You need to review the ABC, abstract, body, conclusion format for a feasibility study. It's in Chapter 11. Review Model 11-7 at the end of Chapter 11, as well as the feasibility study model in Blackboard writing projects. I gave you a sample there, so you want to look in projects and have a look at that sample. Give your attention to the ways in which the sources are used in these models. How are they cited in text? What do they do in text, and how are they cited in text, and how are they cited on the references list? Notice that most sources are summarized or paraphrased in the text, right? You say who says what, and you explain what the source is. You say if it's a white paper. You say if it's something written by a consumer group. You need to tell your readers where you got the information so that they know what type of source it is and how reliable it is for what you're using it for. So as not to obscure the author's point and not to alienate readers. Also notice at the bottom of page 392 that Lessig is quoted, and that the quotation is a clear, simple sentence that conveys precisely information that is needed. Be this good of a judge in your own writing of what material should be summarized, what material should be paraphrased, and what material should be quoted. You do not want to quote a bunch of stuff, because every time you use a quotation, you take away from your own voice, and it is a distraction for readers. So if you have a bunch of quotations, that's really bad writing, really bad. You need to be very, very choosy if you're going to use any quotation at all. Pick one that really is useful as a quotation, that is written in such a way that you could not say it better. And then if you're using a quotation, you have to explain what it's doing there, how it is helpful to you. Prefer to summarize and paraphrase sources in your writing. The feasibility study model in your textbook does not have footnotes, but it does have these parts: a title page and memo, a table of contents, an executive summary, an introduction, definitions, history, advantages of the products, disadvantages of the products or procedures, conclusions and recommendations, and then a references page. So you can see that there are 11 parts for the feasibility study model that is in your textbook. The feasibility study model in Blackboard has footnotes in addition to these 11 parts. It has a title page, it has a table of contents, it has an introduction, it has a background section, a design overview, because that is important for the the item that is being discussed, the existing conditions, because of course the feasibility study has to do with whether or not existing conditions should be changed. An outreach section, speaking to the public, right, and finding out information that way. An evaluation section, which is kind of going to be like advantages, disadvantages. Then cost estimates are separate from evaluation in this one. And then there's conclusions, and then there are appendices, right? Things that are being used or referenced for the paper. So you can see that the general organization of these two is about the same, but the contents, what goes inside each section, is a little bit different because what is being talked about is different, and the purpose for the feasibility study is a little bit different. Okay, so your project 2 is going to have the title page, it's going to have the table of contents, it's going to have the introduction. You do need definitions, you do need a section with background history, existing conditions, whatever you call it, you need one of these things, and it will go in this order. After that, you need your advantages, and following that, your disadvantages, following that, cost estimates, following that, conclusions or recommendations, following that, in-text citations, well, no, not following. In-text citations are going to be throughout, wherever it is you cite a source, and then the references page will be on the back. Now, this is your project 2. This is not your homework, so this is the full, whole enchilada, as it were. So last, however, your homework 7 only needs to have an introduction, definition, background history, existing conditions, one of those, an advantages section, a disadvantages section, and in-text citations. Okay, so that is what you do. And if you have a look here, this is your Chapter 11 that you're looking at. And Chapter 11 regards reports for information and analysis. So you want to give this a good read. You can see that the chapter objectives are to show you about informative reports, which are very, very common in all organizations. Everybody needs to be very, very familiar with how to put them together and evaluate them in an organization. So this is very good practice for everybody. You're learning ABC format for this style of writing. Learn how analytical reports are used to guide decision making, which obviously a feasibility study is very much supposed to guide decision making. And so there you go. Good luck and have a great week.